So today we're just going to talk about the parties involved in a real estate transaction, how we affect one another, etiquette, who handles what, that sort of thing. Hi, Serena. Cute, very cute. And you know what we can do to sort of set our transactions up for success on our relationships and support one another, because we're all on the same team when we're involved in the transaction together. A lot of people, and you'll hear me say this all the time, if you don't know what you're doing, you can ask your escrow officer, and it's true. But a lot of people, I think, expect their escrow officer to do things that are actually agent responsibility. So we'll talk about what's agent responsibility versus escrow responsibility as well today. Okay, so in any given transaction, you have principals. The principals are the buyer and seller. Okay, so principals means buyer and seller, or you can say buyer or seller. Okay, then you have 1, 2, or more agents. Okay, so if you have a dual representation transaction, you can have 1 agent or 2 agents from the same brokerage. But typically, most of our transactions have 2. There can be more than 1 agent representing a client, okay, particularly in high-end transactions, you'll see this. So any agent that's involved in a transaction should be listed on all documents, should sign everything, should be included in all correspondence, all right, because whether or not you have divvied up responsibilities between yourself and another agent, you're both responsible for having all communication and documents for how many years following a transaction? 3. But probably forever. You should have that information available to you. Okay. The other parties involved are going to be on the title end. You're going to have a title rep. A title rep services us, agents. They explain things for us. They're the sales representative for the title company. But the workhorse who's actually taking care of the title stuff, that's the title officer, and that's a different person. And if you open a title order, if you're the listing agent and you open a title order before you go to market or prior to entering an escrow, usually your title rep is going to select the title officer. And if you open title, which I don't recommend once you open an escrow, usually the escrow officer will select the title officer. Okay. Title and escrow work pretty closely together. Who typically selects who the escrow company and escrow officer are?
Seller.
Seller. Is that always the case?
No.
No. Why is that typically the case though? They check that. I'll talk about that in a second. That's because, well, first off, if you're learning from me, you've got your escrow company involved on your listing. So if you're the listing agent, you've already got an escrow open, no one's going to fight that. But it's just typical that the seller would select services, although it is actually against California state law to force a buyer to use seller selection of title company. But it is customary that the seller selects title. In Northern California, it is different because the buyer pays for both the owner and buyer's lender's title policy typically. And so, you know, that is kind of in reflection with the buyer's ability to select the title company, but not where we work. So just get used to it. If you're repping buyer, you typically offer seller's choice for both escrow and title. So who is last involved in the transaction? Very key component, very key player. Yeah, you don't get to answer. Come on, who else? Who's our other key player in most transactions? Yeah.
I'm gonna guess inspectors?
No. Lender, exactly. Buyer's loan professional, mortgage broker, or loan officer. All right, so let's get back to title. So what does the title company do? They ensure the transfer of title, right? They ensure the seller and typically the buyer's lender. If the buyer is buying cash, the buyer doesn't typically have a title policy, although they can. Okay, so if you have a buyer purchasing cash, you'll want to check with them, see if they want a title policy. I'm not super familiar with those types of title policies, so I would call up my title rep and have them explain to my buyer what that looks like. If you're working with a developer client who intends to flip and sell a property, if they're going to do it pretty quickly, they might want what is referred to as a binder policy, where the title company is going to insure them on their purchase and insure their title. They're going to give them a lower cost title insurance on their sale because they've just insured them for a transaction. Okay, and it saves them money. So that's something you'll want to know if you're working with investor clients that are going to flip. So what the title company does is they go and they see anything that is recorded on the title of the property. What types of things show up there? Liens, easements, loans, what else? Judgments, IRS judgments, child support liens. Okay. Some things should pop up on title that have nothing to do with the owner. And that is because title does a search against the property owner's name as well. This is usually cleared up either by paying something off, getting documentation, or it turns out that the person has a common name and it's not actually them, and title runs what's called an index search once they get what's called a statement of information. We're not involved in this. Escrow facilitates obtaining this information. They provide it to the title company and the title company clears it. Okay. So some easements are very normal. Okay. So like an easement for access by utility companies, very normal. An easement for a neighbor to use a certain amount of the property, not normal. So you'll want to see what's on a title report before it comes out. And if you're representing a seller and you see junk stuff on there, or you see somebody else's name than who you're actually talking to, there may be like, you know, marriage certificates, death certificates, deeds to transfer things, or quitclaim deeds that need to be obtained, and your title rep can help you with these things. So title should be involved prior to going to market. If you're the listing agent, you want to take a look at this title report with the title rep so they can explain it to you. I worked in escrow, so I understand what is on a title report, because escrow works with the title company and the seller usually to clear the items off of the title report that need to be cleared prior to close. But when it gets really complicated, I don't even try to interpret this. And my liability as an agent doesn't extend to covering me for my interpretation of what's on title. So don't recreate the wheel. Your title rep is your person who would explain anything on title. I would highly recommend having them review every single title report you ever pull with you. Okay. And they're also able and happy to explain it to your clients. So escrow. Like I said, if you're a listing agent, you usually have escrow involved a little bit early. If you're learning from me, why? Well, if you need to order any kind of building report, if you're getting an estimated closing statement for a potential seller client you're working with, you'll have already started working on these things. If it's a condo, hopefully you have ordered HOA documents up front so that you can accept an all cash over asking offer and close in 10 days, right? The dream. Because if you don't, HOA docs take a long time to get. If you don't have everything up front, you can't close early or quickly. So escrow, I would call sort of the wedding coordinator of the entire transaction. They kind of mother everything. They talk to all the parties involved. They provide the loan professional with everything that they need in order to process the loan on their end. They obtain all of the information and documents that the title company needs from the buyer and seller so that we can clear title, clear their names, get them prepped for sale. They would facilitate getting any documents or deeds over to the title company and items cleared off of the title report. They would order what's called a payoff statement for any existing mortgage the seller has on their home. They get all of this information from the seller. At the time we open escrow, they'll send out what's called an opening escrow package. So again, you've heard me say this yesterday, I'll say it again. It's very important that you tell your clients, whether they're buyer or seller, to please promptly respond to their escrow officer. Please promptly return any documents that they're requesting. Okay. Now, as far as the buyer's loan professional, they can be the trickiest person in the transaction. They can be lovely, or it could be somebody that causes you a lot of issues, right? And you don't ever really know until you're there. So I like to start off the relationship by letting them know that I'm there to help them, that I want to be aware of and involved in any problem solving that's taking place, that I am very good at getting what I need done. And so if we need extra time, even you think you need extra time for anything, you let me know and I will go get it. Please don't put me in the situation of accidentally misleading the other agent and then having to fight for time I could have easily asked for and received had I done it properly, right? The other thing is that escrow, the lender, title, everyone needs information from us and from each other to do their job. So one of the first things that affects us in a transaction that a buyer's loan professional is going to do is going to be to order an appraisal report. But they cannot order an appraisal report until escrow gives them what they call fees, which is basically an estimated closing statement. Okay, so an escrow doesn't like to give these estimated closing statements to a loan professional until they receive the buyer's earnest money deposit. So let's stay on top of having the buyer get their money in sooner than later. Okay. I always tell my clients, typically we have 3 business days because that's where a contract's written. Please do it sooner. If they can't for some reason, I will explain to escrow, hey, I've got a really tight appraisal contingency deadline. Please issue the fees anyways, so that the lender can order the appraisal report. Okay. Who pays for the appraisal, guys?
Seller?
Nope.
No.
Buyer.
Buyer. They
Well,
pay directly for the appraisal. Okay. So buyer needs to also take care of that with their loan professional.
Is that a credit to them later?
And once the fees go out to the loan professional, and I say loan professional because a loan officer and mortgage broker are very different things, and I want you to understand that as an agent. A mortgage broker, you can pretty much say anything you want to. A loan officer works directly for a bank, and you need to be very careful about what you say to them. If my clients are working with a loan officer, I almost always try to steer them to a mortgage broker anyhow, because generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, they can get a better loan product from a mortgage broker who can shop more loan products than a loan officer working at a bank who has very limited access to just what their bank offers. And a lot of buyers are very surprised by this, and it oftentimes increases their purchase price, which is good for me, right? I had a great buyer once. I showed them property for 4 months. They made great money. They wouldn't pull a trigger even when we found what they wanted, which was hard to find. And I wondered why. And it went into the loan somehow. And I was like, who are you working with? Right? This is early in my career, so I didn't steer them as hard as I demand. I don't even steer now. I demand, or I say work with someone else. And they told me, oh, I'm working with my, he told me, I'm working with my wife's college roommate. I'm like, from where? Some small bank. And I explained to him, oh, you really need to talk to a mortgage broker. Let me set you up with my guy. We had an offer together later that day, no qualms anymore. He was like, oh, this is fantastic. I didn't know, I was very stressed about being able to make these payments. So I always kind of try to steer my buyer in that direction. In any case, so once these fees go out, you'll want a calendar, both as the listing agent and the buyer's agent, to make sure that the appraisal's been ordered at least 4 or 5 days, at least maybe even a week prior to when the appraisal contingency expires, because it takes some time. Okay, the listing agent is contacted directly by the appraiser. The loan professional is not allowed to have any contact with the appraiser whatsoever, and that is so that they can't influence the appraiser's decision. And so if the listing agent is not making it a priority to get the appraiser in, that can be delayed. Some appraisers are really busy, some work really hard, some don't, right? So it might take them a couple of days to figure out when they can, both mutually make it to the property. If you're the buyer's agent and you're hearing about this, offer to help, offer to help. Then once the appraiser goes out to the property, they may call out things that they say they will not release the appraisal report without having done. A lot of times this has to do with smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, that kind of thing, water heater strapping. Fine, The listing agent needs to get that work taken care of. It's part of the retrofitting in the city of Los Angeles anyways. Try, like if you're with the appraiser and they're saying this, try to ask them, can I just text you photos once it's done? A lot of them will say yes. Some of them, however, will not do it until they come back out and physically re-inspect, and they'll charge the buyer a re-inspection fee for the appraisal report. Okay, and it delays you. Anyways, let's say that doesn't happen though. The appraiser goes out, does their appraisal. It could take them 24 hours to turn it around. It could take them a week to turn it around. It depends on how easy it is for them to comp it out. And again, what their schedule is like and how hardworking they are. So that's why I like to babysit the appraisal. Okay. A couple of other important things. Let's talk about who does what key things. All right. So ordering of insurance. Escrow orders insurance once they have the buyer's insurance information. The lender needs the buyer's insurance in order to fully approve the loan and issue loan documents. Okay. Who orders retrofitting? Well, we do. Listing agent, sorry. Listing agent is supposed to order the retrofitting for City of Los Angeles. And we'll talk about that more in listing class or listing contract class and RPA class. Did you have your hand up? Building report. So certain cities have building reports. That's a listing agent's responsibility to order. However, I usually do it through escrow. So if I'm a listing agent prior to going to market, I introduce my seller to the escrow officer. I ask my escrow officer to please coordinate having the building report ordered with the seller. Why? Because the seller's paying for that up front. Same thing if it's a condo and I need HOA documents. Okay. Let's see what else.
And that's only in certain cities.
Yeah. Both buyer and seller typically have to have items notarized during the course of escrow. So if you have an out of state, out of country, or seller with plans to travel, you'll want to make sure that they're going to be available to have the grant deed signature notarized. Okay. If they're in another country, they'll need to make an appointment with an embassy, which can sometimes take over a month depending on the country. Some of them are quick, some of them are not. If the buyer is purchasing with a loan, notary will need to sign the loan documents with them. So check with your clients, make sure their schedule's on. If you need to, it's typically escrow who makes the arrangements for the notary. Either the buyer and seller go into the escrow offices and they would coordinate directly with escrow to make that appointment, or escrow sends a traveling notary to where they are, which is quite expensive, but it's usually the fastest route of getting it done. During your transaction, there are certain things that we would do every transaction that affect the other parties, all right? So if you make any financial adjustments to anything, whether that's a reduction of purchase price, commission, or credit, who needs to know about it?
Both parties.
Both parties and
Escrow.
escrow and
The lender.
the lender. However, we do not tell the lender typically why we're making financial adjustments, because usually they're in relation to repairs, right? A request for repair. So we also hide this from escrow because all information that escrow has, they need to disseminate equally. So we do not stipulate reasons for why there's a credit or reduction of purchase price in anything that we send to escrow or title. We do not discuss it with them. We do not include them on emails in inspection requests, none of that. They get simply the information from the final result. There'll be a credit of this from the seller to the buyer. That's it, okay? So when we have a request for repair, we do it on documents associated with request for repair, but we also draft an amendment to our contract, just talking about the credit or price reduction, whatever it is. Okay, we would not address any repairs in there or give any explanation for why that financial change is happening. Okay. What else? trying to think of like the typical ways we can mess people up. So as agents, we do things a lot of times that change contract, not just the financial terms, but like, let's say we add a buyer, remove a buyer, anything like that. Anytime we're changing a basic term of the contract, it's going to affect the loan. It's going to affect the loan. So if we have holdbacks, if we are adding someone to title, if we're removing someone from a transaction, all of that needs to be cleared with the buyer's loan professional. All right. And like I said, if it's a mortgage broker, you can speak very openly with them about everything, and you want to check with them before you do things, not after you do things, particularly towards the end of a transaction. Because once you get into the end of a transaction, a loan is, getting towards its final approval stages if it's not already formally approved, and they're getting ready to issue loan documents. Well, loan documents need to be signed and they need to be accurate when they're signed, right? So if there's any changes at the end, we need to take care of that prior to that happening. Let's see. So once the loan documents are signed, all of the terms of our contract are met. We've lifted all the loan contingents, all of the contingencies. The buyer has sent in their final closing funds. What happens? What's the process once loan documents are signed, buyer sends all their money in, all of the terms of our contract have been satisfied? Come on, guys. Nope. Fund the loan. How does the loan get funded? What's the process? Okay, so escrow receives the signed loan documents and back from the notary, or once the buyer's finished signing them at their office, and they do what's called what is called packaging them. The lender needs certain copies certified by escrow. Certain original parts of those documents go to the title company. The deed of trust that gets recorded, the original actually goes to the title company, whereas like the original note goes back to the lender. The buyer's lender may or may not fund based on copies of these documents. Some of them want them physically back with a live signature on them, right? And there can be what's called a review period. There can be, same day funding, or there can be a 24 to 48 hour typically review period in which the funder that's assigned to the loan would go through the documents. Then they're going to coordinate with escrow, what are called funding conditions, right? Banks fund based, like the latest they can fund is based on what? When a wire can go out. So remember, right, all banks have different wire cutoff times, but they're generally sometime between noon and 2. So if you haven't funded by 1:30, I'd say you're probably not going to fund that day. Right, and we can't close until we fund, right? We close in LA County 1 business day after we fund. If you're in San Bernardino, there you can maybe do a special recording in which you fund and close on the same day. I don't know about other counties. Riverside you can? Okay. Everyone should kind of be made aware on the day of funding, like buyer's agent should be particularly aware. It's not common that escrow or the lender would need something for us to stay, but we should make sure we're paying attention to our phones just in case. All right. Once we fund successfully, yay. Escrow does what is called setting it up for recording. So they call the title company, they say we're good to go, we funded. Escrow receives the wire from the loan from the lender, and or title does. It's interchangeable. Typically in SoCal, the lender's funding money comes to escrow, but in Northern California, escrow and title is typically one entity. It can be one entity here as well. There can be an escrow division at a title company, but it's not typical. Why? Their services absolutely suck. You do not want an escrow officer from the title company. I was one for a little while, so yeah, Fidelity bought my independent, and I was like, what is this bullshit? Let's see. So yeah, you fund, record. So you, as the agents, you would then call, give your seller or your buyer the good news that the loan is funded. You're set up for recording tomorrow. Okay. On the day of recording, when can recording take place? Anytime. anytime during the business day. Okay? And once it does, typically title and or escrow will reach out to you. And you may want to do this. The escrow officer I work with when I'm the listing agent knows that she better not dare, but some escrow officers will call your clients and tell them about the good news before you get to. So make sure you let escrow know the good news is yours to deliver. Okay, good news of recording is yours to deliver to your clients. And then what happens next? Agents coordinate transfer of keys if they have not already done so. And if you're the buyer's agent, you make a plan to meet with the buyer to deliver keys to them. And it's feel goods all around, hopefully. Okay, so does everyone sort of understand like how the parties interact with one another? Let's see, I'm gonna give you a little pop quiz Q&A here. Okay, I am seller's agent and I just got a copy of termite report. Do I send that to anyone?
Yes.
Definitely not to the bank.
Yeah, who do I send it to?
Buyers.
No, if I'm seller's agent,
um,
I
That
send it to the
agent.
seller. I send it to the seller. It is not my responsibility to pay it and nobody else needs it.
Do they ever not share if it's down to the wire?
If the buyer's agent won't give you a report, call their fucking broker and get it. Yeah, that's not allowed. If you want reports, buyer's agents obligated to provide a report technically as soon as they receive it. A lot of agents will hold those reports until they make the request for repair. I don't let that happen because, you know, I want to see what's going on, because if I feel like I need to go do some investigative work, then I want to know what I'm looking at so I can do that during the time that the buyer is getting their investigation contingency sort of wrapped up and ready to request. Also, if I see any like problematic behavior, so I can have a little heart-to-heart with the buyer's agent and be like, I'm not sure what you think you're doing, but I wasn't born yesterday and this isn't happening. Or if there's something big that I do deem as valid, I want to start working on my seller sooner than later. Everyone reacts poorly to bad news. I'd rather deliver it now so we have a week to work on, you know, accepting it so that we can have a successful wrap up to our request for repair and move forward. Right? So buyer's agents, send your inspections over to the listing agent. Buyer's agents, if there's a big problem, include the listing agent in right away. Collaborate with them, but I'll talk more about that in inspections class. All right. So found a foundation problem at the house. I'm buyer's agent. I've just successfully negotiated a $25,000 credit from seller to buyer in lieu of repair. What do I need to do? Who do I need to call?
Seller.
Foundation of repair specialist.
Who do I need to call before I sign off on the documents?
Mortgage.
Yeah, I need to make sure that the loan professional or the lender through the mortgage broker, if they have a loan officer, we're not having this conversation. I need to make sure that they will allow a credit that large. Okay, lenders limit the amount of credit a buyer can receive. And this is in relation to non-recurring closing costs. Some lenders will allow some credit towards recurring closing costs, but it's not common. So if my credit exceeds the dollar amount, I need to go back and instead of just a full credit, I need to make a combination of reduction of purchase price and credit for the dollar amount the lender will provide. And I can share this with the mortgage broker 100%. And then once I have that done, what do? What document am I drafting? Memorializing this information, this price reduction and this credit.
An amendment to the contract.
An amendment to the contract. And who am I sending this amendment to the contract out to?
Oh, finance.
No.
All parties to sign and then to escrow.
Buyer and seller is signed, but yeah, to escrow, but who else?
Mortgage.
To the mortgage broker, yeah, or lender, or loan officer, yeah, in this instance. Okay, how about I'm a listing agent. I'm about to sign a listing contract and my clients, I found out that, my client's dad passed and they inherited the property. I pull a title search so that I can get the correct vesting, so I can sign my listing contract correctly with my seller client, and I see a different name entirely. Who would I contact for help telling me what I need to do to have that updated and make sure that my listing contract is valid? Keyword is vesting here, man. Who handles all vesting related
Title.
matters?
Escrow
Title.
account.
Not that you wouldn't say anything to the seller?
Yeah, I would, of course.
Oh, okay.
But before I contact the seller, I need to find out what it is I need from the seller. And I get that from the title rep typically. Yeah. Yeah. An agent typically doesn't have much interaction with the title officer. And if you're going to, usually the title rep will conference call you in, that sort of thing. All right. So, I'm going to pretend to be a buyer right now, and we just opened escrow. Who wants to role play with me? Come on, I need a volunteer. Someone at home, someone here. I'm not fucking scary, guys.
I'll
It's
do
okay.
it, but-
You'll do it.
Oh, God.
All right. So I'm a seller. We just opened escrow, and I'm like, who are all these people that are contacting me now, Cheryl? What am I supposed to do?
Explain to them what their job is
Yeah.
per person.
No, we're role playing.
Oh, right, sorry.
I'm seller. Who are all these people, Cheryl? I'm so overwhelmed.
These are people that are going to help with the sale of your home.
Okay, who's who?
Title company, lender.
No, wait, am I buyer or seller? I forgot.
We started with buyer then. so she's-
Yeah, thank you. I'm confused. Who are you,
I'm gonna be the
Kristen?
buyer. I'm gonna be the buyer.
Okay,
Usually buyers are more clueless because sellers already been through the process for sure, right?
okay. So I would explain to you what their purpose is. To get them.
No, role play. I'm the buyer. Who are these people, Cheryl?
Kristen, so this is Joe Schmo, your title company. We're going to decide on the lender. You're going, no, don't go. The first one was right.
Errol,
Of course.
you know this a
Errol
little bit
knows.
better. Let's do it. Errol, who are all these people?
So
It's okay, Cheryl.
you've got multiple parties involved in the transaction. They're basically all here to work together and
Can we speak-
secure
can you speak up?
a successful closing.
Yeah.
So first you have the escrow company. We'll leave the mic.
Maybe. Yeah.
No,
That's what I started saying, Kristen.
Hold on. You said choose the buy lender.
So you've got the, can everyone hear me now? So we've got the title company.
Guys, I hope
who's,
you can hear Errol better.
Yeah, no?
Anyone at home listening?
All those reactions.
No one.
All right, lovely.
All right.
Everyone's
I'm
awake.
not gonna give credit to anyone watching today for this class unless I get a response.
Anyone?
I can hear.
Okay, great.
All
Yeah.
right, so we have a title company whose function is basically to make sure that we have a clean transfer of title to you from the seller and provide you with title insurance, make sure there's no liens on the property, et cetera, et cetera. You have an escrow company that's like the neutral third party of the transaction. All funds and monies are to be transferred through escrow. Nothing goes directly from you to the seller or vice versa. You have the seller's agent. They won't be contacting you with the listing agent. And you have obviously your buyer's agent. You're also going to have, which is me, right?
Yeah.
And you're also going to have the lender who is going to be assisting you with your loan process to ensure that your loan is approved and get you to closing.
Okay, so there's so many people, I'm not sure I'll remember all of that. Are you gonna keep track of that for me? If you can
Absolutely.
Tell me what they need.
Absolutely. I'll keep track of it for you. And anytime anybody, typically the only people that will reach out to you for anything is going to be escrow.
Mhm.
They'll maybe email you documents that need to be signed. There'll be an escrow package that needs to go out to you. Usually I'm copied on those emails. If I'm not, however, make sure to reach out to me, send me the emails, and I'll be sure to sit down with you and go through all of these documents and make sure you understand what it is that you're completing.
Okay, fantastic. And do I need, When is stuff going to happen? Who's going to coordinate that for me?
So usually when we open escrow, the first thing is to get your earnest money deposit into escrow. Typically you have 3 days in which to do so. And the escrow company will provide you with the wire instructions, which has all of their information of where the wire is to go to.
Okay.
The contract will show the amount of the earnest money deposit. Once escrow reaches out to you with the wire instructions, we have to call them and verbally verify the information before you send any monies anywhere.
Okay.
Absolutely do not send any funds anywhere until you have actually verbally verified with the escrow company first, right? Once the money's into escrow, now we officially really have an open escrow. And the next step is going to be to order the home inspections, which I can assist you with, unless you have an inspector that you'd like to use. I have a couple that I can refer to you, and you can choose one of those. Your lender will probably be ordering the appraisal at the same time.
Okay.
And other inspections would be termite if needed, sewer inspections.
Yeah, we're getting
Right,
really
yeah.
into it. You
Right.
covered it basically,
Okay.
right?
yeah.
So we're
Good
basically.
for you now.
What's that? We're basically just explaining to our client who the fuck all these people are all of a sudden when they're stressed out and, you know, they're overwhelmed because they're buying a house now, right? And our first week of escrow is always kind of like our craziest busy week of escrow. So it's just laying it out, making sure they know who's who, making sure they know that you're going to cover it all, that you as the agent are going to keep track of dates, that you are coordinating with everyone, and just getting them familiar and comfortable with the idea of who they're going to be talking to and what next steps are. Okay? Yes,
Is inspection always after escrow?
during escrow.
Is there during escrow?
Yes.
There's no, it's never beforehand, you're never checking out a house like, before I continue this long journey, I wanna like make sure that I'm not doing this for nothing.
Well, typically, a listing agent and seller would not allow a buyer to come in and do an inspection prior to having their offer accepted, because I don't necessarily deem that a buyer's inspector's information is reliable, but once I receive information from anyone, I am required to provide that to any subsequent buyer. Also, a buyer wouldn't typically want to inspect a property before going to escrow because they have to pay for the inspections, which are non-refundable. And if they spend money inspecting a house that they don't actually end up getting because, you know, some other buyer comes in and gets their offer accepted, it's just a total loss. But typically no. Typically no. A seller and listing agent may decide to do some inspection prior to going to market in the case that they have issues, but that would typically be the only like pre-escrow inspection involved. So, and we'll talk more about those timeframes. Those are all specified in the residential purchase agreement. The new format of our classes is I'm trying to get you sort of acclimated to what the process is, to who the parties are. And I know some of the language is not going to click for you yet because you're not familiar enough with the process or the terminology. And that's normal. I just kind of want to get you prepped with the tools, prepped with the process, prepped with the parties. And then we're going to start like next week, we're starting to get into contracts. And contracts determine timeframes and pretty much everything that happens in our transaction, whether that is from the time a listing period begins or the time a residential purchase agreement is accepted and an escrow begins. Yes.
Are you doing any field trips?
No.
Not
You're
sure
not.
where?
No. No. If you really feel like you want or need to shadow me for something because you're not getting the opportunity with your mentor, and your mentor can't set you up with someone, I will find an opportunity with myself or one of my team agents to get that done for you. But my business is super slow right now. I have one super high-end buyer, one medium level buyer, well, still high-end. And those are slower going. I'm typically working with those clients like 6 to 12 months before we close on something. But I have otherwise nothing except for leases. And I don't want to do them myself, let alone have anyone come along with me. Don't tell my clients that. Yeah, I'm super slow right now, but you're going to start to see, like, if you guys are monitoring the MLS activity like you really should be, you'll see that the market is really waking up. you're going to see probably the most listings go on the market you have seen since last summer, the day after Easter. Yeah. On April 10th, you're going to see a massive amount of listings go into the MLS. And after April 18th, which is the due date for taxes, you're going to see another massive jump of property that goes on the market. And it's going to increase because, you know, the summer months are kind of our high season. But buyers can't really buy until they file their taxes. And sellers don't typically put property in the market before a bunch of holidays because people are less likely to come and see it. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of activity. But yes, if you need me, I will find a way to get you what you need. But we're not doing field trips. I can barely get people to show up. Let's see, how many of you are online? 18, right? I mean, out of 200 and something. In any case, does anyone have any questions about the parties or how they might affect each other? No? All right. Well then, short and easy class today. I hope that you guys have a fantastic, is Passover officially
Yes.
over?
No,
Okay,
7 days.
A
from
fantastic
yesterday.
Passover, Easter, Ramadan, weekend,
All of it.
spring, all of it. Yeah, get your taxes done. And get ready to ramp up your business. Get ready. If you have been quiet, you're planting the seeds for your business months in advance of the current time. So you have already sort of shot yourself in the foot for this high season. So get to it if you haven't already started building.
I do actually have a question.
Yeah.
As a buyer's agent, are you also obligated to provide the listing agent the appraisal report?
No, our contracts used to stipulate that a buyer had to provide an appraisal report to a listing agent. Our RPA specifically states the opposite now, that buyer is not obligated to provide a copy of the appraisal report to the seller. And I know, because I was wrong the first time when I was trying to not give it, and I don't like being wrong. And I was wrong the second time because the contract changed without anyone telling me about it or educating me about it. Never think you know what our contract says. Read the documents all the time, even if you think you know. And it specifically stated we did not need to give it. I don't know why that would change, but I know I was wrong both times and I won't be wrong a third time.
Quick note on the appraisal, it is
Yes.
credited to the buyer.
It is? Oh, okay. Appraisal is credited to the buyer at closing. Are you sure every time?
It goes
Yeah.
on the closing disclosure
Okay,
as a credit. And
Okay.
paid in advance.
okay. That's right, I've balanced to file, just not in like 10 years. What happened, but the buyer doesn't get that money back if the loan doesn't go through, if the deal cancels. All right.
The
Great.
appraiser performed their work to get paid for it.
All right, guys. Well,
Thank you.